Week 3 of Dana White's Contender Series is this week. I'm going to give you a full prediction or breakdown of all 5 fights on this card. First off, we have Jack Duffy versus Nick Piccini. I am going to go with Nick Piccini. He does look, or at least I do think he's going to win by finish on the feet. Weirdly enough, these guys are both kind of grapplers. Jack Duffy more of the grappling aspect, positionally on the ground. And then Nick Piccini, collegiate wrestler, has kind of transformed it into a little bit more of the jiu-jitsu game and better grappling on the ground. But again, a very good wrestler. But on the feet, Jack Duffy is very confident. He's just very wild on the feet, but he's very confident, gets hit quite a bit. I want to say against Narik Avagan, I think is how you say his name. I probably messed it up pretty badly. I think he got dropped like 3 times in a row. Maybe one was like a slip or something like that, but he's very hittable. With Nick Piccini, he's very more of a calculated striker, just taking one shot at a time and, again, just being calculated. Maybe Jack Duffy being super confident on the feet and being wild may help him here, but I do think if you're Nick Piccini, that chin is very exposed for Jack Duffy. I don't think it's that great of a chin either. You could probably land pretty well on Jack Duffy. And Nick Piccini, in case you haven't known, he has trained at like AKA before, I think a little bit while ago. I think he moved to Vegas, training with Brandon Moreno, I think the main training partner of his, one of his main training partners. And if you heard what like Strickland says about Brandon Moreno, like he goes through a lot of training partners. So the fact that he's around Moreno quite a bit probably says quite a bit about at least the athlete and the potential abilities of Nick Piccini in the fight game. So I'm going to go with Nick Piccini here. I think he gets the finish on the feet. Maybe he catches Duffy and then jumps on him and moves it over to his back and gets a submission by rear naked choke. But I do think a lot of people are saying Nick Piccini by submission. I don't mind it. Maybe he just drops something and that's how he gets there. But I don't think he... Well, I don't know. Wait. Well, why don't we look at these guys' careers real quick? How many... Yeah, 4 submissions, 2 KOs. I'm gonna say Nick Piccini. I do think he can just out wrestle, maybe move into like mount and maybe get like an arm triangle or something like that. But I do think that he could potentially knock him down and maybe get the arm triangle. I can actually see that. I think he's gonna knock him down, hurt him, or at least pretty badly, get the takedown, and go straight into like mount or something like that, and move over to a like an arm triangle. Or if Jack Duffy tries to get up immediately and gives up his back, I can see Piccini hopping on that way as well. Either way, I see a Piccini first round finish. I think he runs through this guy. Maybe Jack Duffy might pull something out here. I don't mind it at all, but I just think Nick Piccini's been around a lot of high caliber guys in the UFC. So let's move on. We have Malcolm Wellmaker versus Adam Bromold. I think is how you say his name. I'm playing with the... I think I'm actually going to take a lot of underdogs on this card. I'm going to go with Adam Bromold. Malcolm Wellmaker does look pretty good, and he's they're both 30 years of age actually, but Malcolm Wellmaker I think is just too selective of his shots. And Adam Bromold, I do think even though he can tire out a little bit and he does become hittable at certain points, I think actually early on in the fight he's relatively hittable. I think he actually gets better as the fight goes on. His defense, although is not very high, like he doesn't block shots with his hands or anything like that, he moves his head decently well and is able to kind of get into a flow of things. And I do think he can kind of dodge the attacks of Malcolm Wellmaker if this fight does go over a long period of time, which I do think has a decent chance of happening. I know Bromold is kind of hittable early on, and Wellmaker does have some pretty good power in his hands. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Adam Bromold gets cracked like he has been cracked before. I want to say, I don't even know if I can choose these fights correctly. I think I want to say Mayo, he got cracked. I know there's a fight recently. It might have been Enev. It might have been Enev where he kind of just went out. Yeah, I think it was Enev, the fight, 2.5 years ago, where the guy just went out there crazy and they're kind of just scrapping. Adam Bromold, even in the Daniel Mello fight, he looked good in terms of the flow of things. I think he actually has decent takedown defense as well. I'm going to go Bromold here. I can see him kind of catching Wellmaker as this fight goes on. I think it's kind of crazy, but Wellmaker, you really haven't seen too much of him. He still looks pretty green out there. You can kind of say the same thing about Adam Bromold. And they're at bantamweight at 30 years of age. I mean, that's kind of a pretty rough look at things here. So I don't know how far both of these guys are really going to go. 30 years of age at bantamweight. I'm actually going to go Bromwell here. Maybe he just gets absolutely flatlined out there and humiliated. But I think he took about a year off after his last fight. He's going to be making improvements. I guess this isn't really UFC where you get all that money and a bunch of gyms letting you in, but like being an active UFC fighter. But I do think Adam Bromwell can get this one done. Now I'm actually kind of double thinking whether or not I should take him in this fight. But I do think over the course of a few rounds, if he gets past the first round where it's going to be a little tough, and especially early on in the first round, I think he actually do pretty well as this fight goes on. So I'm going to go Bromwell here. His hands actually look pretty good. And I do think he can just put on a little bit more output than Wellmaker in this fight and potentially kind of seal a decision. I think this one's actually kind of going to be a scrap. So I'm going to go Bromwell in this fight. Let's move on. We have Marco Tulio versus Matthew Duclos, I think is how you say his name. I'm going to go with Matthew Duclos. Like, Tapology is going 100% against these guys, and we haven't really seen a big underdog win on Contender Series, so that's my excuse here. But Marco Tulio was actually on the Contender Series last year. He fought Yusri Belguru, won by decision, and he didn't end up getting a contract. I believe he kind of just out-grappled him on the ground a little bit and just hung in there, and they were kind of expecting a little bit more from him. That's why I think in this fight he's gonna stick to stand-up, and I know he trains at Shoot Box, and they're pretty good on the feet, or at least aggressive, got decent skill on the feet, and pretty good grapplers as well. But Duclos, good takedown defense in my opinion. From what I've seen, he has some pretty solid takedown defense, and has pretty good striking. I think he covers a lot of distance on the feet, which I really like. He's pretty fast as well. I think he can choke the legs of Tulio in this fight, and I do think he can potentially get a finish here, because here's the thing with Tulio not getting a contract in his last fight and seeing what Torres Finney last week came off of one fight when Dana White said he needed more experience and went out there with the same game plan trying to grapple and wrestle. Marco Tulio, I think, would kind of just be a fool to try to do that again. Or at least in his mind, maybe he's thinking like, oh, I need to go out there and get the finish on the feet. And maybe he stays on the feet for a little bit too long than he really needs to. And he could potentially get KO'd here. I don't actually mind Duclos winning this one by finish. So I'm going to go Duclos here. He's a plus 350 underdog. I think if he hits, it's going to be crazy. But he has a 3-inch reach advantage. He does fight at a relatively good range. And I do think he can eventually get Tulio on his back foot and potentially get a finish here in the second round. So I'm going to go Duclos here by TKO in the second round. Maybe this is a crazy pick and I just look like an absolute fool on this card, but I do think Tulio will go out there trying to stand up with Duclos, and maybe he can flatline and Duclos, but they're both 29, relatively young for at least, middleweight. Should be a good fight. I'm looking forward to it. Let's move on. We have Michael Aswell versus Bogdan Grad. I think I am going to go with Bogdan Grad. I think Michael Aswell, he does get a little bit too scrappy and does kind of crash forward a little bit more. And Bogdan Grad, we have seen, even though he did lose, I believe. Did he lose? Yeah, he lost against Tom Nolan on the Contender Series. And Tom Nolan has looked pretty solid. I think he just won, right? Beat Alex Reyes. Took him to a decision, which he probably should be getting a finish, and got KO'd by Nicholas Mata. So even though Bogdan Grad is like super powerful, he was not able to get the finish on someone like Tom Nolan, who is kind of hittable on the feet, which is kind of worrying. But I do think Bogdan Grad, coming off of that Contender Series fight, won by flying knee and guillotine choke, he's very explosive, very powerful, very creative on the feet, like a flying knee, spinning heel kick. He does have a decent guillotine. Hopefully he doesn't jump that in this fight. But I do think this fight actually stays on the feet, so I'm not super worried about it. But I think Bogdan Grad has just way too much power in this fight. 24 years of age for Aswell, so he's still relatively new compared to what an almost 29-year-old Bogdan Grad. I think Bogdan Grad is just going to be a little bit further along in this fight. Probably going to get the finish as well, TKO, I think. Maybe he catches Aswell and finishes him up on the ground in the second round. So I think Aswell is just a little bit green, crashes forward a little bit more. Maybe he'll get better a little bit next time we see him on the Contender Series. But I do like Bogdan Grad. A little powerful, way more explosive, and way more creative on the feet. So I do think he can land a big shot on Aswell and hurt him pretty badly. So let's move on. We have Andrei Puliev versus Liam Anderson. I was really playing with the idea to pick Puliev here. and I really don't mind him because I do think, especially in the clinch, like he does have moments where he does have some nice knees and elbows in the clinch where I do think he can do pretty well. I'm not super worried about his gas tank in a 3-round fight. You normally see it over like the second half of the late part of the second round and third round. I don't think this fight probably goes that far, so I'm not super worried about it in this fight particularly. But I was watching the Nikita Kondratov fight, and Liam Anderson kind of has like a very similar game plan where he goes forward. His striking isn't necessarily like high level, but he goes forward, sits in the clinch, looks for a takedown, and gets some decent clinch work, and then kind of just tries to walk you down and land some decent strikes at range, like some head kicks. He throws a lot of head kicks, especially recently. But Pulev is kind of nasty on the feet. But what you saw from Nikita Kondratov in that fight is a very patient Andrei Pulev in that fight, which I don't like. A lot of it, I think, had to do with the clinch work of Pulev or Kondratov in that fight, which kind of just held Pulev a little bit back. The only shots he was really landing in the clinch was away from the cage, and a lot of the stuff that Liam Anderson uses to try and get takedowns is up against the fence in the clinch, making it a little bit boring. So maybe Liam Anderson. Here's the thing with this fight. Because it is Contender Series and it's not a regular UFC bout where guys are actually trying to win, they get their bonus and all that. You're trying to get signed in this fight. So maybe Liam Anderson is a little bit confident in his striking ability and plays with Pulev a little bit more here and ends up getting caught and finished, which I can definitely see. Like Pulev in his last fight looked absolutely, or I think I actually couldn't find the Oliveira fight, but I want to say Morzev. In his last couple of fights, at least before the Kondratov fight, he looked pretty nasty on the feet, which I do like to see. But I don't know. I see the same game plan that Liam Anderson likes to fight with, and he is getting better on the feet. He's 29 years of age, so he is kind of entering that prime area of his career. 27 years of age, too, which is... I'm really split on this fight. I am going to go with Liam Anderson, though. Maybe just... Fuck it, yeah. I'm going Liam Anderson. He maybe can catch Andrei Pulev. Oh my god, I can never say these damn names correctly. In the second or third round when he does start to slow down. What I will say as well is Liam Anderson does do a good job at going to the body of Pulev, so I think that will eventually slow him down as well in this fight, with just nice body kicks. I think the same thing that Kondratov was actually putting into that fight as well, which was slowing down Pulev towards the end of that fight. So I am going to go with Liam Anderson. I think he can, with the advancements in his stand-up, I think he can potentially get a finish here probably in the second round, just getting that extra work to the body. Maybe Pulev just kind of goes out there aggressive, which I do think he needs to do against a guy like Liam Anderson, put him on his back foot and land some of those strikes at will, but I just don't see that happening. Liam Anderson, a decent wrestler. I don't know if he's going to be able to take down Pulev because Pulev does have some pretty solid grappling ability, but I do think the clinch work is going to be a big factor. The kicks to the body is going to be a pretty big factor. I do think Pulev will eventually start to slow down. So if Pulev can get an early finish, I think he'll definitely be looking for that, but I'm going to have to go with Liam Anderson here. It's a little risky picking Pulev. Well, it's weird to say that when I pick, massive underdogs. Like this guy's only plus 170 on this card, but I could just get all these wrong, which is the worst part about that. I think I got all five, or I got 5 wrong last year on one of the cards, so it definitely can happen. But I'm gonna go Liam Anderson here. Let me know who you guys have down below in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time.